So soft tissue is just that. It's literally these tissues in the body that are soft, okay? And so really roughly speaking, those are the muscles, right, which we all know, which make us move, right? They attach onto our bones and they have everything move. And it's also what wraps around the muscles, what's known as fascia, or sometimes called connective tissue, okay? And both are very complex and actually dynamic. Fascia is this incredible webbing of tissue that literally is from the brain to the toes. It wraps around everything. It wraps around the organs, it wraps around the muscles, it wraps around the bones. And so it's this interwoven network of tissue. And so a lot of what I'm working with is not just muscle, or when you start working with your knees, or you come to someone and get on the table and say, okay, I want you to work with my knees. They're working with all those layers. And what's so important from my perspective to understand is that these tissues have really significant impact in the body for movement and how you feel, okay? And that tends to, there is in some ways a little bit more acceptance of this that is being introduced into sort of more of the kind of mainstream thinking. But it's been a little slow in this country. You go to other parts of the world, lots of parts of Europe, okay, the doctors, the MDs have to train in massage. Okay? Some of the work I've been doing is with this gentleman. He's actually originally Ukrainian. And he talks about how throughout lots of parts of Europe, Germany, Eastern Europe, to actually become an MD, you actually have to train in massage. It's considered part of the medical protocols and medical work that you do as a doctor. To start to understand massage as both preventative and curative is a big shift for a lot of people. So for a lot of people, massage is kind of stress release, which there's nothing wrong with, right? And a lot of massage, if you go to a spa, you're going to get a very pleasant kind of stress reduction massage, which is wonderful. It's a lot of health benefits. It's really good for immune system, circulation, it's good for stress. But when you come in and say, you know, I got a problem with my knee, or I got a problem with my elbow, or I've got neck pain, or I have a spine injury, okay? There's actually a whole field of work, a very much more targeted and much more specific type of hands-on massage, which we'll call either therapeutic or medical massage. They can address a lot of those issues. And a lot of times what I find is that many of these problems start in the soft tissue. Okay? Now that's not exclusively the case. But a lot of times people are coming here, they're getting referred by doctors, and I have knee problems, or I got shoulder pain, I got neck pain. A lot of times that is actually because you've been walking around with some bad postural habits, which we all have, which is part of being human, which is putting unequal forces on the muscles, which attach onto the bones and the joints, and that builds up over time. Okay? And all of a sudden one day you wake up and you've got this kind of like ache or pain somewhere. Okay? If you don't address that at some point, it's going to become worse. Okay? And what happens is the forces that are pulling on those bones or those joints or those nerves get worse, and then the problem gets several layers more complicated. And then you have a compressed nerve. Then you have a displaced vertebrae. Then you have a joint that as it opens and closes, it's not opening and closing in alignment. Okay? So this is to kind of introduce the idea to think about, you feel an ache and pain, first one to go, oh, let me feel around that. What's going on? You know, is there a muscle that's causing that, right? Rather than jump to this conclusion that it's something internal to the joint, it's something there. Even when it gets to the point, it's in the joint. You've had surgery, okay? Surgery creates a whole bunch of issues for soft tissue, okay? You develop what's known as scar tissue, okay? Because the body comes in and goes, oh, someone cut into here, okay? Even though it was for a good purpose, but the body says we got hurt. And so it lays down a type of tissue that's very thick. And it's basically trying to seal up the area that it got cut. And scar tissue is very thick and it's very dense. And because of that, it makes it very hard to have certain movements where scar tissue has been laid down. So we can do a lot of work where we start to open up and actually, even in a way, reorganize how the scar tissue is laid down on the joint. Okay. So one of the things that I see commonly, and this is it, I would say that this is a common goal whether you're working through an issue or you feel pretty good, but you just want to take care of your health, which is that in my opinion, you're always looking to strike a balance between two ideals in the soft tissue, in your muscles and in the connective tissue. On one hand, you're looking for a certain amount of strength and vitality. And so people go and they work out, they come here, they work out, really important, they go to the gym. Very important. What people don't always recognize is the importance that not only does that tissue need to be strong, but then it also needs to be flexible, or it needs to move, or what we would say, it needs to be mobile, it needs to have mobility to it, okay? And sometimes what I'll see is that people have been working out, or they've been very physical, and so there's development, but there's not that mobility, there's not that movement in the soft tissue. And that creates a whole bunch of problems, okay? Because soft tissue is doing just that. It's literally moving, okay? And so for us to move, muscles, if you looked at them under a microscope, are these long parallel bands, okay? And when a muscle is kind of happy, it maintains that kind of even, smooth quality and texture about it. Okay? Now, even if you're developing the muscle, the ideal is that you are keeping that muscle along sort of that kind of original, smooth texture. Okay? But often what the tendency is the muscle starts bunching up. Literally, it starts getting tight. And so again, if you looked at under a microscope, what you would see is you'd see those long parallel bands starting to literally stick to one another. Okay? So when people talk about, oh, I got a muscle knot here, okay? The technical word for that is an adhesion. Okay? Because what's happening is those muscle fibers are literally adhering to one another. Okay? And so a big part of what we're looking to do is to create space in the tissue, to open that up, and to flush fluid through there, right? Because when that soft tissue gets really compact or compressed, you don't have the fluids, the blood to come to feed the cells, to remove the waste. Tissue gets very dehydrated, okay? It gets basically malnourished, and it starts becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. And so even though you may be doing really good things, you might be very active, you might be finding yourself getting kind of this sense of, I'm having trouble moved, or even I feel a little locked in here. Right? And so there's this balance always. The other thing is, before we actually do some hands-on work, is most people underestimate the range of things that can happen. Okay? It's not just joint issues, but it can be a lot of joint issues. It can be all kinds of things. It can be joints, it can be neurological, it can be spine, and often I see a lot of misdiagnosis. What I'll show real quickly is an example of, it's very common, I've seen this a lot with what's known as carpal tunnel, which is where someone will have some pain through this part of the wrist, okay? And so the bones in the hands are called the carpals. And there's a little space right here where there's a nerve that passes through. And true carpal tunnel is when the nerve that passes through here gets compressed, okay? And so a lot of people come and they'll have pain, and they'll have the diagnosis, often from the doctor, that it's carpal tunnel, okay? Now, sometimes that is truly the case. A lot of times that is not the case. Okay? So the question is sort of how can that be? Okay? So the nerve that runs through that part, oops, let's it upside down. I'll kind of walk around. It's called the median nerve. And you can see it comes off of, this is the cervical spine here by the neck, and it passes down through this bone, which is the collarbone, and goes all the way out through the arm and the wrist. Okay? And what you'll see is that a lot of times people will have the symptoms right here in the wrist. And so when you go to the doctor, everyone looks right here. Which, don't get me wrong, makes complete sense. You do want to look there, okay? But this nerve it's basically one big electrical wire, okay? And if you put pressure anywhere along that nerve, you can have pain or symptoms anywhere further down on that nerve. Okay? So this is a little bit more sophisticated. So this is looking at coming off of here is the side of the cervical spine, the neck. This is the clavicle here. And all these branches are a whole bunch of nerves, okay? And if you look, I'm sorry, I'll keep passing this back and forth. So this is labeled right down here, the medial nerve, okay? And that, again, is what we're actually interested in. So it's a very complex, actually rich area, okay? But you have those nerves that all run down through here and out through the arm, okay? They're surrounded by muscle, completely surrounded by muscle. In this picture, they've removed all that so you can see the nerves. In this picture, they show, this is a little bit further down in the arm. This here, this is the deltoid, or the top of the arm, and here's the biceps. And this actually, the red line is that same nerve again, and it shows you really nicely how it's basically kind of sandwiched in there between these nerves, okay? So, there is a lot of nerve issues that people will get a particular diagnosis from, and we go to work the wrist, and we work and we work and we work it, and nothing changes, okay? Because actually it turns out that there's nothing structurally in the hand, okay? I've seen a lot of knee issues. I'm not saying it was your case, but a lot of people come and they're getting ready for surgery, okay? And I will say 30 to 40% of the time, you do not need surgery, right? There are muscles which attach, and they're strong muscles which attach right into the joint here, okay? If they get really tight, they start pulling the alignment of the joint off. And that means every time that the joint is opening and closing, it's doing so at an improper angle. And it starts to basically grind into itself, okay? So a lot of times, by rebalancing the muscles that are on either side of the joint, okay, you start to heal the knee. Including, even if you've been through surgery, that is still critically important, okay? And in fact, it becomes one of your key issues, is that you want to create a balance. Front of the knee, back of the knee, side of the knee. And you want to create a balance on how all these muscle tissues are going into the knee joint. Whether you're working on yourself or someone's giving you deep tissue work, you can tell the quality of their deep tissue work by how they drop down in depth. Okay, because someone who just goes and drops right through doesn't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And if they don't like that, you can say, I said that. And there's real reason for that, because if you go in too fast, basically the nervous system locks everything up, and the muscle tissue just says, stop, I don't like this. Okay? But if you sink, if you take your time, you'll actually find that you can actually start to go into quite deeply. Okay? Yeah.
I just noticed that difference. It was so tight because I did just what you said. It went really fast.
That's right.
Now it's not as bad.
That's right. And that makes a huge difference, actually. And whether you're working on yourself at home, which I'm hoping after this everyone will, or you're coming and working with someone on the table, that's a key point. Because a lot of times, like, you feel something, you're tight, you're hurt, and you get in there, you go, I don't want to get in there. And it's actually, it doesn't work. It's very inefficient. You end up hurting your hand, actually. You're going to be fighting yourself. And you're not really making a change in this area that you're working. Okay, what you want to do is really, it's like sinking in. I wasn't able to get it, but our very first training ever when we were learning massage, we'd fill up these little Dixie cups with corn starch and water, and we would make this kind of like thick, viscous, almost like putty kind of thing. And if you whacked it with your finger, you couldn't pass through. But if you just stayed on the surface, it would start to yield and let you drop in. Okay? Muscle tissue is very much like that. You can do very deep muscle work. Right? You can literally get to the layer where you're at the bottom of the muscle and where the connective tissue wraps around the bone. You can get that deep. Okay? That layer is called the periosteum, and I work with that. People who do this kind of work with that. But there's no way you get to that from just going zip. And what you're going to end up doing is creating more scar tissue. Okay? So even when you're doing deeper work, you really want to take your time and you want to listen to the body and to the muscle tissue. Okay? But there's a lot of information there. So a healthy muscle has this quality of long, smooth. Okay? The fibers are these kind of like spiral long fibers as they wrap around the bone. Okay? As a muscle gets really tight, it adheres to itself. Okay? So you can feel a couple different ways that it adheres to itself. One is this, it's like little pebbles. It's granular. Okay? So it's actually a very common presentation of tightness in the muscles. And you'll feel these little bumps or granules that will sometimes wiggle under your finger. Those are actually muscle knots. Okay? Sometimes they'll be a little bit bigger. Sometimes they get actually very concentrated and they form these special knots that guys like me get very interested in, something called a trigger point. This takes some time to feel, but it's not as esoteric as it may seem. You can feel all this stuff on yourself. Okay? And I can't encourage that enough. There are a lot of people, you're more than welcome to get on my table, but you can start feeling these things at home. Well, as we say, it's quite palpable, right? In massage therapy, we talk about the skill of palpation, of what can you feel from your hands. Okay? So, so one of the main things we feel is this shift from kind of long, even, smooth muscles to muscles that are tight. Okay? So we'll get kind of granular textures, little points of adhesions. We'll get kind of bigger, almost pebble-like or marble-like maybe, kind of places where it's tight. You'll get areas where the whole muscle will feel like it's almost seized up. You'll get a whole region where the whole area will feel very compact and dense. Okay? And everywhere you go in that area, it will just feel very tight. Okay? You will also feel, like I was talking about, you'll actually sometimes feel like actual lines that are tight. Taut bands, where you actually have a part of the muscle that's been isolated, but certain fibers, and they are literally, it's almost like feeling a cable. Okay? Us guys tend to develop those a lot, right? We tend to sometimes be a little bit tighter on our muscles, and a lot of times in guys I'll feel kind of like areas where it kind of almost feels like it's locking down a little bit, and you'll get some of those taut bands, particularly in our lower back. Guys are really good at getting tight lower backs often. So there's lots of big muscles that are feeding into the knee joint. Okay? On the back we have the hamstrings. On the inside we have muscles called the adductors. On the side we have something called the IT band, which gives a lot of people problems. Runners sometimes bite people. We have the calf or the gastroc principally here, and in the front we have the quads. We have a lot of big muscles that are going into the knees. Okay, any and all of these can actually contribute to knee issues. Okay, so if you've ever had any kind of knee pain, this is a great place to start to look and ask, what's going on there? Is this the cause of the pain? So you said you tend to feel it stiff in the back of the knee. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going a little bit quicker, but I want to take my time and I want to listen. This is the first and most important thing. So right here, this is literally in the back of the knee here. There are actually some small muscles which are right in the back of the knee joint. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start to sink in here. The one thing I don't want in this case is I don't want you to feel any pressure in the front of the knee where the bone, it's called the patella, the knee, okay? So as long as you're not feeling any pressure there, I'm going to start to drop it. And again, I want to take my time, just like you would if you're getting work from someone or you're working on yourself, okay? With a tennis ball, with your hand. That's fine. So that's okay. So sometimes, yeah, you got a little nervous system discharge. Sometimes something feels weird. Someone touches a tendon that you go, well, I didn't even know I had that there. And your body just kind of like goes, whoa, wait, what's that, right, kind of thing. And so all that's okay. Like, again, as long as there's no kind of intense pain or anything, these little movements, these little shifts are not bad things. And not to sound cliche, but it's all connected.
Yeah.
It literally is. And so don't be surprised, like there's nothing strange or odd when someone works your knee and you feel something in your shoulder. Or someone works your toe and you feel it in your head. You know, it's actually not that odd. So this feels like there's you just had like a little kind of...
Yeah, it's fine, yeah.
Jerk, nervous, kind of like jerky reaction where the muscle just kind of goes a little bit.
You got a lot of fear around your knees too.
Yeah, a lot of fear. A lot of fear about, I can't do this, I can't do that. There's a lot of fear.
No, and actually, thank you for mentioning, and that's a big piece of this too. And to be open to that, and working like this is different than just, and I'm not saying we can't or shouldn't do this, but you know, if you just take a pain pill, so there's a time and place for that, absolutely. But when you're working the body like this, a lot of times you will feel if there are emotions and associations, even memories sometimes, with injuries or certain parts of the body. It's not unusual to have those feelings and experiences come up. And so it's actually a great piece to bring in because, and it's all part of this of just like, let's slow down and see what we feel, including emotions. Because a lot of times there's gripping due to emotions. I've had problems with my shoulder for the last 20 years. So what happens? You become incredibly protective of it, consciously and unconsciously of it.
I want this pain.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in a way, that's very true. Yeah, it's very true. So it's something to again, just be gentle and patient with yourself because that's all part of it as well. But as you feel that and you start to discover sensations that maybe you haven't felt for a while, just take a nice deep breath and just start to kind of feel into this area, right? And let's go back, if you're okay, let's go back to this tendon again for just a minute, okay? And let's just revisit this and just see how this feels in your body right now. So there's the fibers, okay? So I'm just gently going across the fibers, and now I'm going to put a little bit more pressure there. So just literally, what was that? Maybe 30 seconds, a minute, okay? And just feeling and putting some awareness there starts to change not only the quality of what's happening in the tissues there, but the whole association of what that feeling is and what it means. And maybe that area is not, so it's not just a trigger for like, whoa, wait a second, I don't like this. Right? Like you can go, oh, okay, wait a second, I can tolerate this. Or maybe this even feels good. Okay?